All Nagas are revealed, so it's time to give all of them a rating to try and guess how good they are and how much they're going to impact the meta. Now, there's also another big change, like there's 5 cards being removed and replaced with other cards and 2 cards being reintroduced. Those will also have a big impact, and that's a video I'll be making tomorrow, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to catch that. I'm going to start off with the 1-drop Shell Collector, which is a Battlecry 3/1 Naga. Add a gold coin to your hand, which is another token card in Battlegrounds, but this is an actual cool one. So we've seen a card before that gives you coins on Death Rattle. It used to be a 3-drop, I think. It's also a neutral, but this 3/1 stat line, we also see it in Quillboards. It gives you a gem. I think a coin is a lot better than a gem. Keep in mind, the coin is a spell, so we have seen Spellcraft synergies already with other Nagas that I'll go over later. So this coin will trigger some of these Spellcraft synergies. It's also super flexible. You can spend this coin however you want, while with Swabby it like reduces your tavern cost, so I think it's definitely a way better Swabby. It might be slightly better than Alley Cat, because Alley Cat, after you sell your 1/1, you're left with a 1/1 on the board. With this, you're left with a 3/1 on the board, so arguably it's one of the best tokens that we have in the game right now. It's super flexible, super decent stat line. I'm gonna give it 5 points. I think you will see this card being picked quite often, and it's gonna make a lot of cool curves and a lot of good plays possible. The other 1-drop that we have was the Mini Myrmidon. I'm just gonna call this guy Mini. It's adorable. It's a swapped stat line, so it's a 1/3 instead. Spellcraft, give a minion +2 attack until next turn, so on itself it's a 3/3, which is a really good stat line. Again, a brief reminder on how Spellcraft works. The turn you play it, you get the spell, and then at the start of every turn you get the spell as well. And the spells only last a turn, you can't keep them in hand. A 3/3 is pretty decent stats, and getting a spell or a Spellcraft minion this early on is good for some synergies that we will see later on. So I think it's a great tempo card, a great enabler. You can put this 2 attack on any card on the board, so it doesn't have to be put on this. I think it's a decent card. I think I'm gonna give it 4 points because, again, compared to all of the other stuff that we see on 1, this seems like it has the most potential in the mid-early game. But if Nagas turn out to be really bad, then this card probably doesn't see as much play, because then the Spellcraft value from this is just gonna drop down. But tempo-wise, it's definitely a big consideration. On tier 2, we have first of all Snail Cavalry, which is a 5/2 Naga. Once per turn, after you cast a spell, gain +2 health. So we see the very first scaling for Naga on tier 2 as after you cast a spell. So this is the coin, for example, that you get on tier 1. And this is why the 1-drops are so important. They give you spells already, or consistent Spellcraft, which will be able to give you +2 health every turn with this 2-drop. And this is like the payoff for going with that sort of stuff. And this makes also Sunbake a lot better, so the Quillboards, because those gems also work with this card. And a 5/2 isn't a bad stat line. Play a single spell and there's a 5/4 on tier 2. Really good. It's like a Molten Rock bit with already a 5 attack stat line, and I would say that just getting a spell every turn is probably easier than having to cycle elementals early on at least. But it's only once a turn, so in the mid game, I guess Body Elemental and Molten Rock are slightly better because you can cycle more elementals, while with this, it's still once a turn. I think I'm gonna give this card a 5. This just seems like a must pick if you have any sort of spell generation or a coin in hand or a gem. Like, it's already a 5/4. That is one of the biggest cards on tier 2 with a lot of potential. It's a Naga, and there's Naga synergies. Like, I think it's gonna be like a Battle Master by the mid-end game, which like is decent. You can definitely sell it off later if you want to go into something different, but yeah. Now there's another 2-drop. This is Deep Sea Angler, which is a 2/2. Not a great stat line, but it has Spellcraft, give a minion +3 health and taunt until next turn, which the 2/2 stat line is pretty bad, and +3 health and taunt, it's decent, but this is a 2/5. Yo-Ho is a 3/5 taunt already, so as a pure stat line card, it's not amazing. But again, it just gives you that Spellcraft, which synergizes well with the previous 2-drop we saw and with the 2-drop I'm going to show after this. So I think this is the kind of card you don't just want to take for tempo most of the time, but something that you want to take if you already have the enablers on board. So I think I'm going to give this 3 points. Like, I think it's decent in the right situations, but it's not a game-defining card like some of the others I think will be. And here is the 2-drop that, dude, this is the most insane card I think I've seen for Nagas. 2/5 Lava Lurker. The first Spellcraft spell cost on this each turn is permanent. So this turns those spells that you have that go away every turn into the permanent scaling. And it's a 2-drop, so we see 2/2-drops that already have permanent scaling from Spellcraft, which is kind of insane. It's a 2/5 stat line, which is really good, knowing that it can scale. So this is probably just gonna like be such an enabler. You're fine on tier 2, you play this, and you just start scaling this up until the end game. Because when it's golden, you can play 2 spells on it every turn. Like, the spells that we saw so far aren't great. It's +2 attack and +3 health and taunt. which is like decent to put that onto this card every turn. It's free scaling again. Let's say you have the other 2-drop as well. Like, it's harder work on tier 2 on steroids is how I try to compare it. So I definitely think this card will be nerfed. This has to be a 5 points. So far the early game for Naga seems incredibly strong. Like, great tools, economy, scaling, stats, all of it. So the early game for Nagas is scary. If you hit that, I think you're just gonna steamroll pretty heavily. But that comes at a cost, of course, in the mid game that we will see in a second. So Lava Lurker, keep your eyes out on this one. Also, I guess a quick reminder, if you want to see me try out these Nagas, as soon as this patch drops, I'll be live on Twitch every day for hours on end, because I'm also pushing towards Lobby Legends this month, trying to compete into the top 16 EU. So if you want to see me try these out, break the meta live, be sure you follow me on Twitch and be there when the patch drops. And then Stormscale Siren, which is a 3-star 5/4 Naga. Pretty good stat line for a 3-drop. At the end of your turn, your Spellcraft minions cast their spells on themselves. So now, you know, it basically just doubles kind of the spell power that you get from your current Spellcraft units on the board. It's just a massive tempo boost. If you already have this Spellcraft setup and you just slam this on the board, you're gonna get so much stats. I'm a little bit scared again of the spikiness of Nagas. This is an issue that I talked about in previous video, where Spellcraft just seems pretty strong right now and just very spiky, and especially this card is gonna be an enabler that if you have a decent board, you play this and essentially you're not gonna be losing any fights. You'll be getting so much buffs, especially with the 2-drops as well that like scale up. So I definitely think the early game is pretty overtuned compared to what we currently have. Like, if you compare this to any other tribe that we currently have, stat-wise, scaling-wise. I don't think I want to give it a 5 because it's not really gonna stay on your board, I would assume. It's more like something you dump if you already have a good setup. So probably if you have like one Spellcraft unit, you still want to take this up because of how much tempo it is, which makes it really good. But standalone and in the mid-late game, I don't think it's gonna see that an insane amount of play. But it's an insanely strong card. I'm gonna give it 4. The only reason I'm not gonna get 5 is, once again, you need an existing setup and it doesn't push you into the late game, just like some of these 2-drops that we've seen that actually do scale up. Then Shoal Commander, which is a 2/2 Naga, Spellcraft. Give a minion +1/+1 for each friendly Naga until next turn. So you get rewarded if you have a full board of Nagas here, which is going to be pretty decent. You do want to play a bunch of Nagas because they're strong early on. So at most, this is a +7/+7 spell. Again, with the previous card that we just talked about, it is +14/+14. Which is just a massive boost. But again, it's a boost. It doesn't scale on itself if you don't have those 2-drops. Just imagine this with the Lava Lurker. So you get like +7/+7 permanently on Lava Lurker. Compare that to the tier 4 Gold Grubber or Champion or whatever. Like, those cards scale so slowly and compared to this combo, which is a tier 2 and 3 card combo. Yeah, this is gonna be scary. I think this card alone isn't amazing, but just in that specific combo, it's gonna be nuts. I have to give it a 4. I don't think I'm gonna rate any Naga so far underneath a 4 just because of how strong the synergies are between them. Now we just need to hope they have a late game, because all of this is really good early mid game, but it doesn't really compete with the late game scaling that we have existing in the game. But of course, we're still just at the 3-drops right now. Then we have Poshmark the Vengeful, which is a legendary 4/5 Avenge 3, get a Spellcraft spell of your tier or lower. So an Avenge card coming back, a tier 3 Avenge card, which is really strong because most Avenge cards that were on tier 3 got nerfed to tier 4 because they gave too many supplies and too many cards. Avenge 3 is also not a whole lot, but it gives you a Spellcraft spell, so it's not economy, it's not cards or triples, it's essentially just a boost. So this is just gonna give you a little bit of a boost for next turn, like cards, kind of like Diablo. If you play this and you have a decent Avenge setup, which is not the case with Nagas. Nagas don't have Death Rattles or Reborn so far, it's just stats. So that is the main downside that I see right now. They just are stats, they are just bodies. But Poison is going to be quite reworked this time around, and we're going to see a change in meta, a shift completely. Buddies are removed, so it depends on how much pure raw stats are going to matter, how this is going to compete to Divine Shields and the new Poison that we're going to get in the game, which I'll talk about again in the next video. This is just purely the Nagas. So getting an Avenge setup with Nagas is not really going to happen, so you probably are playing a non-Naga build when you want to slap this on the board. And then just getting Naga spells, well, if you get the one that gets +1/+1 for each Naga on the board, that's going to be kind of trash. But if you just get attack boost or health boost, or if you're on higher tier, it could give you other Spellcraft spells that we'll see later. I don't think this is that good. Even though it's an Avenge card, Avenge 3 on tier 3, I don't think most of the time you'll have an Avenge board and that the stats that you get in return from this is gonna matter. So this seems like the weaker Naga we see so far. I'm gonna give this a 2 because I think, you know, in some cases it could be useful, but I definitely don't think this is a must if you are trying to set up any sort of board. Now onto Wave Rider, which is a tier 4 2/8 Naga with Spellcraft, give a minion +1/+1 and Wind Fury until your next turn. Which, it's a 2/8, that's not a great stat line on tier 4. And it just gives +1/+1, which isn't great stats, but the Wind Fury part is, I guess, the important part. But on itself, it's like a 3/9 Wind Fury, right? If you just cast a spell on itself, which is kind of like a bonker, but it doesn't give you gems. So it's not great. In itself, it's not a great card. Now, it's more a tech card, I think. This is something you play on the board if you have a big cleave. If you have a big Hydra or you need Wind Fury, then this is going to be useful. Most cards don't have damage use for Wind Fury, like just if you have a big dude or whatever. Getting a Wind Fury is nice, but you don't really want to play a 2/8 for it. You don't want to keep this on the board just to be able to play a Wind Fury every turn. So I think the main use I see for this card is in the late game, if it's a 1v1 and you roll this card in your shop, you can just play, sell it to get Wind Fury onto a cleave, and that way try and outplay your opponent. So it's more techy. I don't see people tripling into it or just playing it when they have a Naga board because it's not that useful. Unless we see more synergies with Wind Fury that we get introduced, but that doesn't seem to be the case right now. So I have to give this a 2. Next 4-drop is Eventide Brute. This is a 5/4. After you cast a spell, gain +1/+1. So more scaling. This time it's not limited to once a turn or whatever. It's just a spell. So any coins you generate, blood gems, hero powers, triple rewards, all of it counts, meaning this card is actually pretty good. It's a 5/4. Let's say we compare this to Gold Grubber or other tier 4 cards that like slowly scale up. This could go out of control. If you do have like a comp with Gem Splitter and Divine Shields, every gem that you cost is going to give this +1/+1. Kind of like a Dynamic Duo in that sense, which Dynamic Duo is fine. But just the fact that this does also work with Spellcraft and has extra synergies, and I think might have more applications. Again, it's gonna be dependent on how useful pure stats is. So far, this is a pure stat tribe, and it seems pretty decent for Menagerie. We're gonna see some more Menagerie tools in Nagas as well. It really all depends on how the meta shakes out. Maybe this is gonna be amazing, maybe it's just gonna be countered by some of the poison stuff or the high attack Divine Shields or the tech cards that we get. If you just compare this, I think, to the 2-drops that you get so early scaling up, I don't see the point for this, because every Spellcraft spell, if you just put that onto the 2-drop, that's gonna probably scale faster than if you would just cast the spells and this gets +1/+1 each time. Yeah, a 3. I think it's controversial. I thought this was gonna be nuts at first once I saw it, but the more that I think about it, the more I think it's actually probably a bit overrated. And tier 4, 4/4 Eelbound Archer is Spellcraft, give a minion +8 attack until next turn. In itself, pretty bad. So it's a 4/4 that gives you +8 attack. That's it, right? Like, it's good on an early cleave or an early deflecto, but you don't really just want to play this card for it. Now, this would be a bad card if the 2-drop didn't exist. So the fact that you can give +8 attack permanently onto that 2-drop makes this really good. So it's like a card I think you only really see play if you do have that Naga package and you want that scaling onto that card. Other than that, I think it's mediocre. So it's kind of hard to rate this, because this could be a 4 if you think it will be easy to get that package together and to get that great +8 attack value. But most of the time, this card is a 1. Maybe a 2, probably a 1. So I think I'll just sit somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna give this a 3, because even if you play that tier 2 Naga, I'm not even 100% sure if I want to keep a 4/4 on the board just to get +8 attack a turn. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I think it's like in the middle of what Spellcraft has to offer. Then Reef Explorer is a tier 4 3/3 Battle Cry. Discover a minion from a type you don't control. This is super interesting. A type you don't control, so this could be anything. The pool is very wide, but it just discovers another minion, so it's kind of like a token. It's kind of a card that discovers another target, maybe a Murazond, but from a type you don't control usually isn't that useful. If you're playing a Naga board, what is this gonna give you? Like an Alley Cat, a Pabot, and then, I don't know, some other crap. So I don't really see what you would want to use this for. It does have a Battle Cry, so it's next with Brand. It's just cover, so it's not random. I guess this is just a Menagerie tool, right? Like, if you have a Brand Menagerie setup, you could slam this on the board, try and look for other pieces, maybe for buffs. Yeah, this seems really bad. It does only cost 1 gold, so I'm not sure if people will just take this when they roll it on tier 4. I would assume not, if you don't make good use of the Battle Cry. This is a really cool card and a really interesting concept, but I just don't think it's good. I don't see the application for it right now. If you do see something or think of a way this could be good, leave it down below in the comments, but I have to give this a 1. I just think this doesn't have a practical application right now. Like, if Amalgamons were still in the game, spoiler, they're not, so then you could just go to tier 6, and then if you have all tribes, this would discover your Amalgamons every time. But yeah, that is not possible, so I don't see it. Then we have Critter Wrangler, which is a tier 5 5/7. After you cast a Spellcraft spell on a minion, give it +2/+2. So this is finally like actual ways to put your Spellcraft into scaling onto any card. So now you can scale up any card on the board, and this is why I think Nagas are actually good with menageries. Initially I thought these would just synergize really well with each other, especially looking at the lower tier Nagas that just work with Spellcraft really well, but the higher tiers really seem to focus on menagerie a lot, like the 4-drop that discovers a random tribe, and now this that can scale up any card on your board if you put a Spellcraft spell on it. So specifically, Spellcraft spell doesn't work with gems, for example, because that would probably be way too good. So you do need Spellcraft like generation on the board, so that's why I think a lot of people are gonna buy the 1-drop and just keep it around, because that way you can enable all of these higher tier scaling. +2/+2 is not nothing, so if you generate a bunch of spells every turn, this is huge. But the issue is you can't really generate that many spells a turn. You have limited board space, and so far Nagas only generate 1 spell. If they're golden, they only give a golden version of the spell, not 2 spells. You actually can't have a full board of Spellcraft Nagas. They're pretty weak. Like the basic stat line so far for Nagas is really weak, so you can't really have 5 or 6 Spellcraft Nagas on the board. You will have like 2 or 3 at the most. So that is like +4/+4 +6/+6 a turn. This doesn't seem amazing. Just compared to other scaling on tier 5, like I think it's decent if you triple into this and you have an amazing Spellcraft setup, you can make some use for it, but late game it's not going to catch up with other scaling, because that's what I predict at least, that you can't really play a full board of just pure Spellcraft cards, since the Spellcrafts are really weak statted and it's not amazing to keep around. Now I guess we have like the Avenge card on tier 3 that gives you Spellcraft spells, so maybe you just generate Spellcraft spells with that and then put those stats onto a Hydra or something. I don't know, maybe there's some things I'm overlooking, but I'm gonna give this a 3. I think it's okay scaling, but I don't think it's gonna be the main cornerstone of the Naga tribe. Then Corrupted Myrmidon is a tier 5 2/2 with a really interesting effect. Start of combat, double this minion's stats. At start of combat, it doesn't keep it. At first I thought this was kind of crazy because it like scales and scales and scales, but no. Like this is a 2/2. It turns into a 4/4 and then out of combat back into a 2/2. So this is kind of shit. Like this is just a card that you have and you need to scale up and put resource into. I guess this is a nice card to put all of your Spellcraft spells on because they double their effect. So essentially, I assume this is the payoff somewhat. Like you put all the Spellcraft spells on there. You have some permanent scaling with the other 5-drops and other Naga synergies. So maybe it scales a little bit over time. And you just have like a big heavy hitter in combat. But again, I don't know how good just pure raw stats are gonna be, so I think this card is really bad. I'm gonna give it a 1. Like, I don't see the practical application for this. I don't think you want this to commit on, because it's just going to be a pile of stats that falls off to actual real scaling. Even if you scale this up to a 10-10, like it turns into a 20-20, is that even good enough? You scale this to a 20-20, a 40-40. Yeah, okay, but there's better 5-drops to have in that spot. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's a 1, and I think it's the most underwhelming, but interesting Naga. When I first saw this, I thought it was really cool. Then Glow Scale is a 4/6 Naga on tier 5 taunt. Spellcraft, give a minion Divine Shield until next turn. So we finally see an actual like effect on the Naga. All of these Nagas are just bodies, like they just exist. But this gives you a Divine Shield that you can use every turn. So poison, you can Divine Shield a poison. You can DIY make an Amalgadon. That's the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, Divine Shield poison. So I guess this is the kind of card that you can, like, again, like I talked about previously, a card that you can play just to get the Divine Shield and then sell off. Like in the late game, if you want to attack around your opponent, you can play this, sell it, and use that Divine Shield onto one of your big dudes or onto a poison or whatever to get that little bit of an edge. I don't really see that you can keep a 4/6 around. So trying to keep a 4/6 taunt around that doesn't scale, that doesn't do anything except for provide you Divine Shield every turn, probably isn't going to be worth it. This is probably not a card that you can justify keeping, but I'm happy it's a 5-drop at least. I think it's interesting. I'm going to give it a 3 because I think it will have an impact on the game. The fact that you can give anything, even a Hydra, even a big Battle Master, whatever, you can give anything Divine Shield now. It's going to allow for a lot more counterplay, a lot more cool decisions, but I think that's about it. Oh wait, you can permanently Divine Shield the 2-drop, right? That keeps all of these spellcrafts that are put onto it. Yeah, okay, I guess this is huge for that. Now onto the 6-drops, and these are the ones that are probably, you know, gonna be very impactful. Tide Mistress Atissa is a 7/8. After you cast a spell, give 4 friendly Naga +1/+1. So After you cast a spell, again, this could be anything, including blood gems, coins, whatever. Works with hero powers, so that is a huge part that you can fit this into any board, but it only buffs Naga. So you do need 4 funny Nagas, ideally, if you want to get most out of this. And that way you can start scaling up actual Nagas that you want to keep on the board. Now, what would this be? I'm not entirely sure, because so far all the Nagas we've seen are pure stat piles. I guess this might be some of the techie Nagas that maybe you want to keep around. It's gonna be a very interesting playstyle that I'm not used to. It seems like a lot of these are temporary effects, a lot of them are spikes that are somehow trying to convert into a late game that scales. But I don't see this again being good, like compared to what other tribes there are and what other cool shit you can do. What would be strong, I guess, is if you have double Atissa, kind of like double Felbat or double Kaligos. You have 2 of these that buff each other as well. Then you need 2 more Nagas, maybe that give you a spell every turn. Then you're gonna have like a really strong core on your board that scales up, and still a bunch of flex spots to fill in. So even though this works with other spells, you need 4 Nagas, so you're not really gonna generate spells any other way, most likely. It's tough. I don't think it compares to the other tier 6 scaling, so for that reason I'm going to give it a 3. I don't see this even being better than a 2-drop almost. You know, if you high roll, it's good. Obviously, if you hit this early, if you have an amazing Naga board, you hit 2 of these, it's gonna be good, and I do see it actually winning games maybe. But again, depends on how useful stats are. How much stats are going to play a role in the next meta. Before I go into these other 6 drops, if you do want to catch Naga gameplay early, like I mentioned, the Twitch live, all that stuff, but I'm also going to start up the second channel again, which is my gameplay channel, so I'm going to try and upload daily gameplay there of the Naga tribe, of the new heroes, how they play. So if you want to stay in the loop of things, I would go check that out. Now, Orgozoa kind of sounds like a cheese, Gorgonzola. The Tender. Tier 6, 5/9, Spellcraft, Discover, and Naga. So it's a tier 6 that every turn discovers a Naga. Compared to most cards, this is bad. Like you have Witchwing, which gets you random battle cries on tier 4 for avenge 3, so you can get multiple battle cries a turn. Lookout, that discovers you. Murlocs works with Bran. You have Nosy Looter, I guess it's a 6-drop to compare this to, which every 2 turns gives you a random golden card and then discovers a 6 from that golden. So I don't think discovering a Naga every turn you can play a 5/9 for. Like this is just gonna be a 5/9 slap on the board. Not amazing tempo. That could give you really bad Nagas. It could help you to triple stuff, help you build up the board and get like stuff together. But again, it depends on how much time you have to make this work. Usually, especially with how spiky Nagas seem, usually it seems like you won't have enough time to just play this and milk it for value and get great, like a lot of cards out of it. So I'm scared that that's gonna be the case. But let's say it's a slower meta. Let's say you can play this on the board for a couple turns. Then it's good, of course. Discovering a card every turn is pretty nice. Especially if it's from one tribe, it makes Nagas easier to triple, look for pieces, look for the scaling. But yeah, it just seems so slow. I feel like this is not worth it. Unless we see a Naga, which is not going to be the case, that like doubles every Spellcraft, this is not going to be impactful enough. Yeah, I'm sorry, Orgozoa, but I'll have to give you a 1. So the 6 drops seem underwhelming for now, but we have another one to go. So there's a lot of other new cards revealed that are replacing other cards. Again, those are not Nagas, so I'm going to do them in a different video. Real quick, what do I think of Nagas? How they're going to impact the meta? I'm not sure. The late game seems to be lacking. The 6 drops aren't like insane. Neither are the 5s. The early game is incredibly strong. So I think Nagas are just going to be very spiky. And in the late game techie, like you have a Divine Shield that you can give. You have a Windfury that you can give. So what my prediction is that the game is going to change a lot because poison cards are getting a rework and buddies are leaving. That is huge, so the game is gonna feel very fresh, very new, so it's hard to predict what the meta looks like. But I think Nagas, because they're purely stat based, that usually doesn't fly. In the end game, you lose to Deflectabots, Mackerels, you lose to the Poison, you lose to Cleaves. So I think this tribe is gonna struggle a lot with that. But early game, you'll get a foot ahead of the lobby if you get all of the 2 drops and the 1 drops that synergize together. So I think it's going to be a very snowbally tribe early on. Who hits it does really well, but I don't think you want to stick with Nagas. I don't think you want to go with the late game scaling. I feel like you want to try and pivot probably into more of a menagerie, probably into a better late game scaling. I honestly don't hate it that much. I think that's kind of okay. I could be very wrong. Let me know down below what you think. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.